And Kane Sims, the one and only
Britain's finest, Mr. Kane Sims.
Dustin Coates.
I like it when you guys are together and talking about voice.
Without further ado,
Welcome to the show.
All right, here we go. Welcome. How is everybody doing?
Doing well. How are you doing, Kane?
Very good, thank you. Very good.
Good.
Not bad. How are you, Mihai?
Pretty well. Just
Nice.
had my morning coffee.
Yeah, basking in the San Francisco rays, no doubt.
Yeah, the weather is really nice today, so hopefully I can get outside for a walk.
Nice. Is the weather in Paris just as Baltic as it is in London, Dustin?
I'm not really leaving my apartment all that much lately, but yeah, it's pretty crisp. It's starting to feel a bit like Christmas, if you were.
Should have had the song queued up there.
Right.
Teed it up. Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to Christmas this year. I'm quite looking forward to it.
You got a tree up?
Yeah, well, I got the tree up. We went picking a tree in a forest full of Christmas trees, which was crazy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
last weekend. It was intense. It was an experience. The best ones we could find were all the way over the other side of the field, and so we had to drag this guy about a mile down this forest and have him carry this big tree back, which was intense, but it was fun.
How'd you cut it? Was it like an axe or like a?
No, it wasn't a. I was imagining myself cutting it with an axe. You know how? Have you seen Deck the Halls, the film Deck the Halls, before?
No.
Danny DeVito and the guy from Ferris Bueller, is it? Or Ferris Buller's Big Day Out or whatever. Anyway, he cuts one with an axe and sets a whole forest on fire. But I imagine myself doing that. But no, the guy comes with a chainsaw, chops it up, puts it on his back, and away we go. Which is good, which is cool. What about you? Trees up? Anyone else got trees up yet?
No, not yet for me.
No.
Yeah, we put our tree up on Saturday. We went. We also went on a trek out to the grocery store, picked out our tree there, and dragged it home, and put up all the lights and all the ornaments and everything. So it feels like home. It feels like we're in the holidays now.
Yeah, definitely.
I think here in California it's a bit different without the snow and without the crisp weather. It doesn't quite feel like proper Christmas. I think once you get closer to the day, it definitely picks up. But until then, it's a bit surreal. You still think it's like summer and you want to go to the beach.
Some people, one of my mates migrated to Australia, and a few people who I know have been over there. My sister actually spent one Christmas in Australia. And I always found that would feel weird because it would be really like that's their summer. It would just be boiling hot temperature, and you're having a barbecue on Christmas Day. It would just feel it would feel mad. I'd like to do it, but it would feel mad. But anyway, that aside, this might actually, who knows when this is actually going to be out? To be fair, I mean, maybe Christmas might have even been and gone. Who knows? But happy Christmas if it has, and happy Christmas even if it hasn't. So anyway, Mihai, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you on. Big fan of the work that you and your team have been doing at Mercedes. And this episode really is an opportunity for us to delve into that a little bit. So as we kind of kick off, do you want to give people a bit of an introduction to yourself and your role at Mercedes and a bit of a description about what you've been doing? Yeah,
so my name is Mihai. I work as a product manager at Mercedes-Benz Research and Development North America. And I'm responsible for the HeyMercedes voice system in the North American market, specifically on the operation and development side, and adjusting the assistant to kind of fit our customers from the North American market.
Cool. That sounds good. And where did you kind of get into this from? We spoke about it very briefly before we kind of started the recording. What's your kind of journey into this space been like? Where have you kind of been? What's your career been like? How did you end up at Mercedes?
I've been working at Mercedes for 5 years now, and I started in connected cars, integrating smart home ecosystems with our cars, and then slowly migrated towards voice. We had a couple of projects. Our team was called IoT and Wearables because we were kind of integrating always IoT devices and wearables with our cars. And when Alexa and Google Assistant came, we started working on those and developing applications for them. And then we merged all the voice efforts from our company into one big group, which is spanning across all continents. We have the main effort in Germany, both in Stuttgart and in Berlin. We have a team here in Sunnyvale, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then we have multiple teams in Asia with a pretty large team in China as well that focuses on the assistant in the China market. Prior to that, I came from Romania, from Europe. I spent a couple of years working in the music festival industry, and I did also spend 4 years in Manchester, UK to do my bachelor and master's degree, which was really cool, and got to experience all the clubbing scene, which was kind of on par with my experience from the music festival industry. So, but yeah, no potting, no clubbing anymore here. It's primarily kiteboarding and outdoor activities.
You don't get much chance to do that much outdoor activities in Manchester. Where I'm from, it's even further north than that, so it's even colder and even wetter. But yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, it's interesting. Where did the Mercedes journey into voice come from? Then you said you've been there 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years ago, where were things at? Had things been started? Was things moving? Was it Alexa that sparked everything? Like, how were things when you first started from the voice perspective of Mercedes?
A lot of people don't know this, but voice has been with Mercedes for quite some time now. Actually, more than 20 years. I think 24 to be specific. Back in the days, cars used to be the platform to showcase new technologies and innovation from all around the world. And in 1996, at the Paris Auto Show, Mercedes unveiled a car called the F200 Imagination. And it was a concept car. Had no steering wheel. It had just a couple of joysticks. And that was kind of like a huge innovation. It had the airmatic suspension and the first voice control system in a car, and that was the first time ever that this was featured in a car. And since then, we introduced it in our production cars, and it has gradually, developed and evolved throughout the years. But I think the big breakthrough came when we launched the latest MBUX system in 2018 at CES, because for the first time, we didn't only have, voice recognition in the car. So it's kind of when we moved from voice control to a voice assistant, because now we had, a connected car, we interface with the cloud, and the assistant capabilities just exploded. And we became so much more flexible in what we can do.
And what does HeyMercedes, the MBUX, do, and how do you pair the difference between, you were saying, a voice controlled versus voice assistant?
It's we see things that the difference how we define internally is voice control is supposed to be more like command based. So there's specific commands that you have to learn and that you have to remember. When you talk to the car, you have to tell specifically those things, otherwise it will not understand you. And when we think about more of a voice assistant, we think about natural language processing, and also a system that constantly evolves, where we can add, we can extend the language model to now understand more, where this was quite hard to do in the past, but now it's something that we do on a regular basis.
So Mercedes then, in some way, shape, or form, has had voice recognition. Whether you would call it, whether some people might have called it an assistant, I don't know, but it's had some form of the Mercedes vehicles have had some form of voice interaction in the vehicles for quite some time. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so what is the? I suppose it's related to Dustin's question. Maybe he's kind of building on it. Like, what is the in terms of what it can do and what it does do? What are the differences now versus then? Because seemingly beforehand it might have been, I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but I don't know, turn off the headlights, turn on the heat and things like that. What's the difference between what it can do now versus that?
Yeah, I mean, it all started with phone control. These were the first commands that the system understood. back in 1996, you can say dial a name or dial a phone number. And remember that back then we didn't have smartphones or even mobile phones. It was basically a phone in the car, which was quite interesting. And it's not such a long time ago, but it feels like ages ago. But I think since then, the big breakthroughs came into, after phone control, we added car controls. And then the next level after that was navigation. Still quite limited in terms of like what you can search and what kind of map providers we used to integrate with, and POI search. But then more recently, with the added advantage of having the cloud behind us with MBUX, the navigation search just exploded. We were able to integrate Yelp and other providers. And we also have integration with smart home ecosystems. And in the latest MBUX that is featured in the new S-Class that was just launched a couple weeks ago now, we presenting, smart home as a new domain that you can interact with the HeyMercedes voice assistant.
So how does that look then? So within the vehicle, you can use the Mercedes assistant to turn on your heating at home, turn off your lights, those kind of things. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so you can do those things. You can turn on and off lights. But when we thought about how to build the domain, we thought about what are the problems that people have when they start driving and they think about their homes. And primarily, we think that people will try to understand if the lights are still on, if the garage door is closed, the front door is closed, and these kind of are the use cases that we focused around and we try to polish the most, because we're trying to kind of remove the worry from the people through the products that we have. And of course, after that, right, if let's say you forgot the lights on, then we offer to turn them off. But you can also do it. You can turn them off from the get-go, so you don't have to go through this process. But given how we interact on a day-to-day basis and what are the things that we do when we are in the car, we suspect that these will be kind of like the journeys that people will have. It's like, oh, did I leave my lights on? That
sounds like probably one of the first things that my wife says whenever we set off down the road. Did I turn you off? Did I lock that door? So I can imagine that doing people. I can imagine that doing people some favors. You want to say something there, Dustin?
No, I was just thinking the Mercedes users, your ideal or your customer profile, people using HeyMercedes, I imagine is going to be a different audience than you've got for Google and Alexa, for a Siri. What is that profile? Who's using HeyMercedes, and how did that influence you when you were designing it?
It's quite surprising, actually. I think when we're looking at customers, they do overlap to some extent, because people currently using voice products, we see them as it's a bit binary. It's either you have the people who are embracing new technology and looking forward to a future where this is kind of like the new thing and they're early adapters, or you have people who don't want to deal with the interface and find this as the easiest way to interact with the car. And it's funny because they use it differently and they have different tolerance on like what does it mean to achieve success. And we find that early adopters are more daring. They go further. They explore. They push our system a lot more. They're more tolerant on things not always working, or whenever they explore, if they find something that the system doesn't currently perform. Whereas the more traditional user, that they're literally talking like to another human being, and it's quite fascinating to to see through our user studies what their expectations are.
Interesting. So we'll advance on that in a minute in terms of the usage perceptions things like that. But I kind of want to just step back again to, you said that when you started, Mercedes had voice recognition in cars for 20 years. So when you started, if it was 5 years ago, Alexa had just been released.
Yeah.
Or it'd been around for a year in the US, hadn't come out in the UK yet. And so what was the journey like from that moment on? Did you start out working on the Alexa things and integrating, like, turn the car on, warm the car up, those kind of use cases, whilst the My Mercedes or Hey Mercedes assistant was being built up in parallel? Like, walk us through like what the process was from you starting, where things were at, and then some of the stuff that you kind of did over the last kind of 5 years to get it to where it is now.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. We, my team specifically focused initially on, integrating with Alexa and Google Assistant and building apps for a connected ecosystem so that you can control, your car from the comfort of your couch. And to inquire about the car, is the car locked, and so on. And this was happening in parallel with, the Hey Mercedes assistant being developed. And once we found the synergy within the company, and we decided to merge the two teams and have one strategy for voice globally, that's where we actually, identify that whenever you interact with Mercedes through any voice assistant, ours itself, we should always have, the same assistant. So you're interacting with Hey Mercedes through our cars, through MBUX, and you're interacting with Mercedes through Google or Alexa. Implementation-wise, it's not one, but there are a lot of similarities on what we do and how we try to respond and how we adapt the customer experience.
Interesting. So we've had 5 years worth of adoption of smart speakers. I remember seeing a report, it might have been a VoiceBot report, I think, from a couple of years back, that said that the compatibility of the car with the voice assistant that a customer has, if I'm an Alexa house, a compatible car that works with Alexa, is something that actually might end up influencing purchasing decisions. It was one of the things that was found. And there's been a lot kind of, a lot of headlines wrote, a lot of kind of like noise made around voice in the car and things like that. And I know that, Mercedes, what was it, last year, Super Bowl ad around the Hey Mercedes assistant and things like that.
Yeah,
a lot of awareness going on, a lot of I don't want to use the word hype as such, but every car now is kind of starting to ship assistants and things like that. And so what have you learned based on working on either the smart home side of things or the Hey Mercedes assistant itself? Have you learned that from a customer perception perspective, it has that kind of driver? Like, are people buying Mercedes cars because of the Hey Mercedes assistant? And how does it factor into people's understanding of how they perceive the car or the brand?
Yeah, I think it depends on the market, but it definitely is a selling point. And people come because they're intrigued and interested in the idea of having an assistant in the car. We are quite aware of, the speculations that is happening in the media that, having same assistant everywhere could lead to a better user experience in the end. But we don't think that's necessarily the case or the only future that we're having in front of us, because if you think, naturally we interact with multiple people. And it all comes down to the type of interaction or what we get from each other. So if, the assistant that you're interacting with at the time is providing the capabilities that you're looking for in that specific moment, then you wouldn't mind calling it Hey Mercedes or Alexa. So that's why we don't think that one assistant will rule them all. We think in a future where we're going to have multiple assistants, and they're going to be really adapted to the thing that you're trying to do at that point in time. which is why we're pursuing with our strategy. We're working really hard on our assistant, and we want to compete with our competition and be a player in the industry of voice.
Interesting. So where do you think that leaves you then? Because part of the issue, call it an issue if you want, it's not necessarily an issue, but for example, let's look at the BBC. So the BBC realized that people are using Alexa to access BBC services, but ultimately Amazon is then going to end up intermediating the relationship between the customer and the BBC content. And in some cases, actually being the arbiter or the decider over whether or not someone actually receives BBC content. So, for example, if you were to say something like, I don't know, play me a podcast or watch the news, for example, then it's essentially kind of almost in part, although you can have skills enabled, but it's in part kind of the control is in Amazon's hands in terms of where it sends you for various things. And the same thing with Google, really, is that these assistants are becoming kind of intermediators, if you like, between the customer and the brand. And so one of the BBC's reasons for creating the Beaver system was to essentially have some ownership over where they can distribute voice-enabled content. So I'm curious about whether the Mercedes with the HeyMercedes assistant, in terms of one is the interoperability between that and other assistants. You said there that not kind of everyone, people might have multiple assistants. I think actually there was a Voxley report done that said that most people on average use 1.5 at the moment. I think that's probably most use Alexa, and then whether you've got Android or Apple, you use the other one. But yeah. The reality is that people are going to be buying Mercedes vehicles that have Alexa, that use Google Assistant, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the interoperability initiative, and do you see the Mercedes vehicles being a conduit to multiple assistants, or do you see the importance being actually for the HeyMercedes assistant to own that customer experience?
If you think about the assistant itself, it's basically a gateway, an entry point to a variety of services, right? So if you think about what we use the assistant for in your home is listening to music. I have a Google Assistant in my kitchen, so I look at recipes while I'm cooking. Sometimes some information on different topics if I have a question and my phone is not around. So we don't necessarily see it as, when you're interacting with an assistant, you're not necessarily, that's not the product itself. So you don't necessarily want a different assistant in your car. You want the things that assistant does in your car, right? So if Mercedes is capable of doing all of those things, then the need of having a different assistant is kind of like taken away from there. And this is what we identified as the root problem that people are looking to do. So that's why, we're expanding. We're focusing. Our strategy is not to be super wide in the variety of use cases that we offer, but to be very narrow and deep. So when you're thinking about, car controls, the phone domain, navigation, we want to be the best at doing that. And we also want to expand on things, that people might also want to do besides that while in the car. So things like asking about the weather, asking about sport updates, getting their news, and more recently, smart home, because this is the next logical step on what people, after they get familiar with it, what they're going to explore. So yeah, it's all about fulfillment. It's not so much about what assistant you have, which is why we think, it's definitely worth it to pursue this. And the HeyMercedes definitely has its spot, as with other assistants which are not Alexa, Google, or Siri.
How are you determining the next domains to target? How are you staying focused? Well, you said the next logical step. How do you determine what the next logical step is?
We do a lot of user studies, and we try to identify what our customer needs through the user studies. Of course, we're also aware of the industry, and we look for synergies between where the industry is going towards, what are the most popular use cases. I think at home, smart home is one of the most popular use cases. At least in the top 5, people use their smart speakers to control smart home devices. So naturally, by developing this habit of using your assistant at home to control smart home devices, you have the expectation that if you meet a different assistant, that assistant should perform those things as well. But we also do, analysis on different clusters of usage, so that we can better understand, how our customer is using our product. All of this together kind of leads towards a decision that we're going to make. But it's quite planned, and we develop a strategy a bit in advance, so that we kind of know the direction to which we're going towards.
Have you ever been surprised in this research? Maybe something that you thought for sure people would want to see, and then they just really didn't care about, or something that they really cared about that you didn't foresee ahead of time?
Well, not necessarily like that we were surprised about what they cared. I think the biggest surprise was the difference in the markets. And this is where one of our biggest efforts comes into play. We quickly identified from the beginning that the customer in different regions is very different, and also in what they do. So the customer in the US is focused on different things than the customer in Europe and the customer in China. And you have to adapt to what your customer needs, because otherwise you're going to lose them and they're going to use a different product to fulfill their needs. I think that was the biggest surprise on how much adaptability we have to bring in each market. And it's definitely something that we underestimated at the beginning. But I think now with the recent setup that we're having, we're more prepared to challenge that and to achieve it. I would also be interested to kind of dive deeper into this topic and understand from you guys, how do you guys see that people perceive voice assistants, prior to purchasing them, prior to being a user? Like, is this, like, you're talking to a lot of folks on the podcast, and what is everyone's understanding on this, no matter if it's a car or an in-home assistant?
Do you mean an average user's kind of perception of voice assistants prior to owning one? Yeah.
Let's maybe compare with the smartphone revolution that happened 2008, 2009. Smartphones came out, and everyone wanted to have one, and there was quite some immediate. It was still a phone. You were not doing more things than a regular phone, because you didn't have the App Store back then. It was just maybe being developed, and but everyone still wanted to have it. And then throughout time, it became more and more useful.
I don't know. In 2009, like, the iPhone had been out for a couple of years. I think the App Store was around. But when I think about, like, who had an iPhone, I had an iPhone in 2009. But I don't think a huge amount of there's a segment of people who were there who wanted a smartphone. I think probably we might have felt, all us three might have fallen into that kind of bracket. But like, if I think about my mum, for example, didn't get a smartphone until probably, I don't know, 2015, maybe 2014, something like that. And so, I don't know. When some people, I always like to ask, kind of, more when they ask you, like, "Oh, what do you do?" kind of thing. I always like to kind of ask them whether they have a smart speaker, whether they talk to their phone, whether they use the voice on their phone, things like that. And what I've kind of learned is that people don't necessarily have an understanding of the concept of a voice assistant. I think the language voice assistant isn't something that people generally kind of get to grips with. They know it by what it is. Like, I talk to my phone, or I talk to Google, or I talk to Alexa. It's just something that they talk to get answers or to do whatever. Like, my dad, for example, he talks to his phone, doesn't know it's a voice assistant. He just thinks he talks to Google. My parent-in-laws, it's like, well, why? The other thing is, why would I want an Alexa? Like, why would I want one of them? What does it do? So there's a lack of awareness about what it even does in the first place for some people. I think that's just naturally part of the adoption of the kind of cycle that you go through, the adoption curve kind of thing. So yeah, I think there's some people who don't understand that a voice assistant is a voice assistant. They just think that they're able to talk to things, and some people are not really aware of what these things can do. I don't know. What do you think, Dustin?
No, yeah, I think there's the big difference, and you alluded to this, Mihai, between smartphones and smart speakers, is that smartphones were replacing something that everyone already had. And Kane, you mentioned, 2015 was maybe when your mom had a smartphone for the first time, and 2015 maybe, I don't know for sure, maybe it was around that time where you can't really buy a non-smartphone phone, right? If you try today, you can, but it's really difficult. Smart speakers are a brand new thing entirely, except for certainly in places like the car. Right? I haven't had a car in 10 years now, so I'm not keeping up too much today. But I know that there's always been controls for the heating and for cooling and for the entertainment system, and so now you have voice there, and so that seems like a normal place where Kane was mentioning, well, this isn't necessarily a smart assistant. This is just how I control the AC, or this is how I control my phone. So it's interesting because either the people you speak with now, they know what smart speakers are, and it's just this ambient part of their life, or it's just not really something that they even register as something different. It's just an interface.
Right. I mean, you can argue that smart speakers are replacing the radio, which everyone had in their homes.
Yeah.
But you can control what you listen on the radio with your voice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like that. We spoke about that. I remember in when we first kind of kicked off the podcast, that was kind of one of the things we were talking about. Is like smart speakers are radio 2.0 kind of thing, or like you get the interactivity and the productivity from your phone with the content from the radio, but yeah, the format of the radio, I suppose. But I suppose what we're kind of touching on here, I think, is interesting in that the average person. I mean, for me, to be honest, a voice assistant in the car probably would be a contributing factor to me making a purchasing decision. If I was in the market for a new car, then the voice assistant would play a part. I don't know whether it would steal the show for me, but if it had, I think Alexa and Google Assistant built in would kind of be expected, I would think, for a relatively new car. But if it had its own assistant, it would be something that I would be interested in, and it might influence my decision making. For the average person like my dad, I don't even think he would think about it. I don't even think he would use it. Maybe he might use it, but I definitely couldn't say with any confidence that he would. So what is the actual usage like? We've spoke at the beginning around, or it could be a decision-making factor. But the reality is, for those people who are not early adopters of this technology, who don't necessarily spend 5 hours a day talking to the phone, who maybe's just got a smart speaker, but they only play music with it, or in fact, maybe it's the part of the majority of people that don't have a smart speaker, but they want a new car and they get shown this assistant in the showroom. What's the reality of the adoption and usage of the assistant by the average person who's not an enthusiast? Do you have any idea in terms of, the adoption of it, the usage of it, those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, it navigates around what you do in the car. So making phone calls, listening to music, navigating, which is why we decided to double down on this and, push to be the best at providing these use cases. The car is, I think, probably one of the best places to have a voice assistant, because you're doing a main activity, which is driving, and you want to take advantage of all the things that you have around you, but without being distracted from your main activity, which is driving. So I think the voice assistant is bridging that in the best way possible, because you can talk to it and it will respond to you, will give you enough feedback to know that the things that you're asking for happened. And it's also evolving. You don't have to learn a new language to do it. You can just use your own if you know how to invoke it. And with the new S-Class, you can actually do certain things without even invoking the assistants. You can just talk, and the system will pick up specific things. So yeah, it's and again, it differs on the market. So in the US we have different trends than in Europe and then in China. But it's primarily around car activities, and this is it's something when we're thinking about the other assistants and their products that they're offering. I think Google Assistant and Siri have some compelling products with CarPlay and Android Auto, and I think Alexa is trying to do certain things, but eventually, it all comes down to what is the thing that you're fulfilling, and is that really achieving what that person is doing? Because when you get in the car, you don't want to set up this super complicated dashboard. You don't want to take your phone out of your pocket. You don't want to plug in the USB. You don't want to do any of that. You just want less clutter. You want it to be convenient. You want it to be a seamless experience. You get in the car, you start driving, and then you have something that you can rely on there. And in the future you can add personalization and stuff like that, which to some extent we provide today, and we do have profiles that learn based on the things that you do today. But I think we're definitely gonna go away from having to set up all these things and always relying on our phones. Phones, I think, is going to be something that's going to be integrated in every single device that we're interacting with, because eventually you don't necessarily want to carry always a device with you. You want the world around you to adapt to you. And if you think about that future, then a phone is not needed, because a phone is everywhere. You just need yourself.
Yeah, I can concur with that, and I can see that your likes of Apple are sort of on the road to doing that, like breaking out away from the iPhone into a watch that's kind of self-sufficient, but it's still tied to your Apple profile, so it still kind of has that personalization, and the HomePod speaker kind of requires your phone. Probably if you don't have an iPhone and you had a watch, maybe it would sync up with that. I'm not sure. And then CarPlay kind of uses the same sort of thing, so I can see where you're kind of getting at there. And I remember before we kind of put this podcast together, you distinctly asked us to challenge you. I recall you saying, "I want you to challenge me."
Yeah.
And so there's a thread running through this that is interesting, I think, because you kind of started out talking about the old, if you like, before natural language, the old the old voice control was very much turn on the heating, turn on the air conditioning, warm my seat up, that kind of stuff. Then we get natural language understanding, and you're able to do a little bit more things with it. You're able to provide more kind of services, and you said that you integrate with Yelp, and you can do better directions and those kind of things. All of those things kind of fit naturally within the perfect use cases for the car. Controlling the vehicle, probably some questions around whether you can control safety features and so on. Because I know that I spoke to someone at Jaguar Land Rover, and they're saying that's kind of a no-go area if voice control is the only way of getting into your car, for example. So you've got those use cases that would be a natural, perfect fit. You drive in, you want to play music. You drive in, you want to know where you're going. You drive in, you want to put the air conditioning on. Those kind of things make perfect sense. You mentioned that then after that personalization, one of the things that Apple, Google, Alexa either have or are on the road to having is an intense understanding of the customer. Apple knows everything I do on this device. It knows all the services I use, all the apps I use, how often I use them, how often I pick up my phone, how long I spend on it, where I shop, who I call, who I speak. It knows absolutely everything about me. And so Siri could be the most helpful assistant on the planet, because I could get a notification on Monday morning that says, "Hey, it's Monday morning. Usually you call your dad. Do you want to call him now?" It starts to be proactive, starts to be really super personalized. Google Assistant, the same. If you're in the Android world, or even we use G Suite and stuff like that. So Google understands my behaviors and my productivity, the tools I use. So that can start to get a real kind of thorough understanding of me. And the as I imagine the long-term aim of Google, Apple, Amazon is to start getting users embedded into these ecosystems and start using these assistants more often, so that assistant is the assistant that is with you wherever you go. Yeah, doesn't matter if you're at work, doesn't matter if you're at home, doesn't matter if you've got your phone, doesn't matter if you've got your watch, doesn't matter if you've got your AirPods or your headphones, doesn't matter where you are, your assistant that understands you is there, and whatever you ask for, it can solve that kind of problem. One of the areas that needs to be is obviously in the car, because some people spend a large amount of time in the car, and therefore if Apple understands that I'm listening to one podcast on my HomePod, it makes sense for it to continue playing that podcast in CarPlay. It makes sense for Apple to give me that notification on Monday morning to call my dad through my dashboard while I'm driving, because if I happen to be in the car at the time that I usually do that activity, then my assistant should kind of let me know. So I'm interested in understanding where your feelings are around the long term of voice assistants in general, and if Apple and Siri and Google Assistant and Alexa is going to be this thread that joins together the moments in people's day. How you think that kind of goes with the My Mercedes philosophy of just helping people get stuff done, because there may be potentially a limit to that, because I'm going to have to train the HeyMercedes assistant in my behaviors, what content I like to do, where I want to go. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm most interested in how you think that the HeyMercedes assistant either can stand on its own in that world, or how you think it might kind of work with those assistants to kind of provide that seamless thread throughout people's day. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a complex topic when you're thinking long term, because while all these assistants know about you, I think they to some extent lack depth, because you're using so many services, and the deeper they go, the more invasive of your privacy they are, and then if they start doing things by themselves, they will just be quite odd, and it's definitely not something for everyone. I do still think that in the future, the assistant is supposed to help us be better at doing routine tasks, and elevate our life, and automate things that are supposed to be stuff that we do on a regular basis, and then we have to do the more creative part of things. So I mean, we are also looking into that. So personalization is something that we're doing, and if you're looking now, even at a couple generations back, we did have a personalization profile where we would learn, depending on who you're calling, where you're going to, and where you're listening to. We would make suggestions in the car, for you to do these things, because we know that you're doing these things while you're driving. And they could be triggered from the car, it could be triggered from your phone. And this is, part of our strategy as well. Now, we want to be part of this, and that's why we're investing and we're strategizing to, further develop our assistant and our personalization and intelligence in our cars. And because we think in this future, of course, we're going to have to see how customers adapt and how they will use the systems in the future. And the future that you're talking about, is definitely possible. But I hope that we're not there yet, where we only have one or two choices on how can we live our lives. You can either choose, the Siri route or the Google route. I mean, this will be very binary and very biased. So I hope that there will be more competition and more options that you can choose to do things. And we shouldn't underestimate ourselves. I mean, we have a lot of things that and desires that change throughout time, and assistants are still quite limited. So I think we're constantly thinking about the future where we're going to have Night Rider both in the car and outside of the car, throughout the assistants that we're going to have. And I really strive towards that future, but that's still quite far away. So we have a lot of work to do before we're going to reach there.
You can always. Sorry, go on, Dustin.
No, I was just going to say, I think maybe building onto that point a little bit, you are building this out right now, but at the same time, I think a lot of consumers have been burned in the past, whether it's with smart TVs or even with cars. You know that Google, you know that Apple, you know that Amazon are going to keep building out their voice assistants. And, if they don't, you replace your phone and you've got a new smart assistant on it. At the same time, when you buy a car, you're buying it for 5, maybe even sometimes 10 years. What can you say and what can you present to these customers who are maybe even actually a little bit wary of purchasing a Mercedes car because they're worried that, hey, Mercedes isn't going to be there the entire life cycle?
I wouldn't say that's true. And I think that the recent announcements and partnerships that we did with NVIDIA is a proof of our commitment towards the future, where we're building cars to last, and cars that evolve throughout time and get new capabilities as year progresses. So HeyMercedes will be there. We're very committed to this future, and even if you buy a car for a longer period of time, your car will develop with you and it will get new features. And the cars are built to last that and to be future proof. So we're also relying on our partners. I mean, we put an immense amount of trust in the people that we work with in all the markets, and we have great teams that support all of our efforts and let us achieve the things that we want to do. I mean, in North America, we work with SoundHound, and if you look at the progress I've been doing on with their assistant, their base assistant that we take from them and we customize further, I mean, they go head to head with the likes of Google or Siri, and this just proves that you can challenge the big guys, and that you don't necessarily have to be on their side to win at this game.
I would agree with that, and I think that you've always got the ability. So one, you're benefiting from SoundHound's domains. I don't know if that's part of it. I'm assuming it is. Is it? You can use SoundHound domain. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you're benefiting from SoundHound's domains that get extended, that gets built on. So you do have a rival essentially in terms of like a genuine assistant kind of rival in terms of compared to Amazon, Google, etc., because you've got that kind of domain knowledge. And then you can always, when we're talking about personalization and stuff like that, you can always allow or in future for providers to be able to be kind of distributed through that platform. I'm thinking like Spotify, for example. If I link my Spotify account with HeyMercedes, now I get my music, my personalized music,
exactly.
and that concept continues.
Yeah.
So I can see that. Building on what Dustin was saying in terms of maybe the lifespan of a car might be longer than 5 or 10 years, but in terms of individuals owning vehicles, they might get passed on and things like that. So what's the process if I have an iPhone now, I get another iPhone, turn it on, sign into iCloud, 5 minutes later, my new phone's back to exactly where my old phone was. How does that work in terms of like, if I've got a Mercedes for 5, 10 years, it knows where I work. It can just send me to work without needing my directions. It's managing all of these different services for me. It knows what temperature I like to have the seats and the heating set, all this kind of stuff. What's the process if I can get rid of that Mercedes? One, what happens to that data in that assistant that's now not mine anymore? And then what happens when I buy a new Mercedes that's got HeyMercedes built into it? Yeah,
it's very similar actually to what you just described with your smartphone. So when you buy an MBUX equipped vehicle, you have to create a profile, and in this profile, everything that is being learned and stored in your personal profile is only available to that profile, and this is persistent throughout generations of MBUX. So now with the second generation of MBUX that is launched in the new S-Class, profiles persist, and you can, take your old profile and then put it in the new car, and your learnings and preferences will be saved and you can just resume when you get a new car. And for the old car that you're returning, let's say you have a lease and so on, you can delete and unlink your account from it. So similar to how you do it with your profile on your smartphone, and now someone else can create a new profile and then build everything from scratch. So I think from an experience perspective, it's very similar to what customers are used to and what we're basically expecting from a connected device these days.
Cool. What is your as we kind of come to the close, what's your top advice or top tips for other people who are looking at trying to do something independently, trying to create their own assistant? Maybe they are I don't know, not necessarily kind of car manufacturers, but anyone, the equivalent of BBC or whoever is looking at that and thinking, I want kind of ownership over the customer experience. I want to enable, a better customer experience on my products and things like that. What are some of the kind of core lessons that you've learned over the last 5 years or so working on HeyMercedes that you think apply to anyone building any kind of assistant?
Yeah, I mean, we briefly touched all these points in today's talk. You have to start with knowing your customer and definitely choosing the market in which you're going to perform these things. Think about the fulfillment. Is the things that you're providing to the customer, is it strong enough for you to need that interface, that entry point, the gateway of a voice assistant? And then third, choose your right partners, right? There's many players out there, and if you choose the right partners, then you can decide if you want a branded experience, like with your own brand, or you can leverage, a pre-existing brand such as Google or Alexa. This way you can basically control how your product is being serviced. I mean, eventually for us, our product is our car. And then a sub-product inside of the car is the MBUX system with the HeyMercedes voice assistant. But the main thing is the car, and the HeyMercedes assistant is supporting that, and is a thing on top of it that kind of creates a whole package that becomes more appealing to the customer and is a selling point eventually for us. So for people who are looking at this, know your customer, think about the actual thing that you're going to fulfill with the product that you're building, and then choose the right partners, because you have many options in today's world, and you can achieve anything. You don't always have to go the routes of Google or Alexa.
Nice advice. Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the go-to examples. HeyMercedes is one of the go-to examples that we certainly point to when we talk about independent voice assistants. And SoundHound is a fantastic company. We had Mike on a few weeks back, and I absolutely love the work that they're doing. And so I think Mercedes, BBC, possibly Erica from Bank of America, and Eno from Capital One. Those are kind of like the four big standout kind of ones. And so I think it's fantastic, the kind of stuff that you're doing and the work that you're doing. And I can't wait to buy a Mercedes and try it out.
Yeah, definitely.
Where can people find out a little bit more about yourself, Mihai, and follow your journey and learn from the stuff that you're doing as well? Yeah,
they can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn. And then I share a lot of updates on the work that we do. We just launched the first day of the Advent calendar for this holiday season, and there's more things that we're going to share as the holiday season progresses. But every major update that we do and so on, we try to keep our customers informed and be very proactive about it. So if you follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, then you can get the latest updates from the HeyMercedes voice assistant.
Nice one, Dustin. When are you going to venture into the car market again and get yourself a Mercedes?
Any day now. Mihai, I think you've convinced me.
Nice. Glad to hear that.
Do you get a commission?
Yeah, we do get a discount. Yes.
If I buy one, do I say Mihai send me and you get a
I can ask about it.
Well, give us an affiliate code if you do, because if anyone
Yeah.
buys a Merc off the back of this, we'll earn a good few quid. Cool, Mihai. This has been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate it, mate. Yeah, it's been fantastic. And
Thanks so much.
thank you.